So welcome everybody. I'm excited. I'm like a total goal setting nerd. I don't know if maybe that's why you're all here. Maybe you're looking for help for your writing. Maybe you're also goal setting nerds like me. This is something I do every quarter for myself and every year for myself. I use different strategies. So today we're going to look at two of them. There's the slides in the chat. I believe that's how they're shared. If you want to follow along or take notes, hopefully that's helpful. If you want me to share them again, just let me know. Just let me know in the chat and I'll reshare them just in case you've joined late and you don't want to scroll back and try and find them. So it's nice to meet all of you. In case some of you don't know me, I'm Christina Strasbourg. I'm the founder and CEO of Agents Helping Writers. We do workshops, we help writers. Sandy actually is someone who's done coaching with us, so you can always ask her questions in the chat about what that's like. She actually did a beautiful testimonial for us, which will be going up on our website shortly. But basically, we do workshops, we do coaching, we do literary consultations. We do our best to kind of help people get their work to a publishable quality so that you can find an agent and so that you can get your book deal. So today we're going to look at identity-based goals versus outcome-based goals. What they are, what's the difference, that kind of thing. I'm glad you need a goal-setting nerd in your life, Sandy. That's why we're friends, probably. We're going to look at the HARD method, which honestly, I think the acronym should be HEART method, but that's what they went with. And then we'll look at how you can track progress without overwhelming yourself. Or if you're someone who really likes data and analytics, how you can do that as well if you're like me and you love data and analytics that way. So I'm going to see if the poll function works, but if you could let me know how you currently set your deadlines. Do you use word count goals like daily word count goals or weekly or monthly? Do you do deadline-based goals, which are basically the idea of, you know, by December 30th, I'm going to write this many words or have my book done? Do you use habit-based goals like every week I'm going to write 3 days a week? Or do you not have a system at all? So if you could just give me a quick click to let me know on the poll, that would be great. I'll leave it up for a couple minutes. I see some of you have done some writing today, so that's great. Some of you have done some cleaning like Elizabeth. That's something I need to do. I've been doing some writing and ignoring my house a little bit. So just a quick look at the results. It looks like most of you use deadline-based goals. So that's an outcome goal. Same with word count goals. And habit-based is something we're going to explore today a little bit more. So thank you all for responding. Oh, deadline-based and word count goals are duking it out for first place. And it looks like word count goals might be edging out by just a little bit. I don't know if you can see the results of the poll. But if you can't see them, then word count goals is 40% of you, deadline-based is 30%, habit-based is 30%, and nobody has clicked no system yet, so that's good news. You've all got something in place to help you. Oh, that's interesting, Fallon, that you do a little bit of everything and it kind of changes day to day. I find it changes book to book for me. Some books I have to use certain kinds of deadlines and others I use different systems. So outcome-based is the idea of focusing on the result you want to achieve. So I mentioned earlier examples like I will finish my novel by June. I will write 1,500 words a day. I will have my outline done within 30 days. So you're kind of focusing on the product of what you're going to achieve. So it's like, I'm going to bake a cake at lunchtime today. The outcome is the cake. And then you have identity-based goals that are more about who you are and who you are becoming and who you want to be, and the habits that define you. So, for example, I'm a consistent writer who works on my novel 3 times a week. So these tend to be more flexible. They tend to be more about what we want. It's not that we don't want to finish our novel by June, but when we often do outcome-based goals, we plan for feeling amazing and superhero us every single day. And I don't know about you, but I am not superhero every day. There are days I wake up with a cold. There are days that I have to drag my bum to the chair to be able to write that day, and I get nothing done. There are days I really just do not feel like writing. And at least when I do outcome goals, it's almost like I used to anyways. I don't do it anymore, but I used to plan for being superhero me every single day. I was like, I'm going to write this many words a day. I'm going to have this many words done by the end of the month. And I'm going to have my book finished by, whatever date, 3 months later. Which every time that you miss a deadline or you don't reach that daily word count goal can feel really demoralizing and is really hard. It's hard to bounce back from, 3 days in a row of not doing your 1,500 words a day or whatever you may have set for yourself. And like Priscilla mentioned, if you're doing something else that isn't a word count based thing and that's something that you use all the time, it's kind of hard to figure out what's the right system for revising or outlining because they're not word count based. So these are examples of that, of those two and the differences between them. So hopefully that makes sense for everybody. But really, the reason why it matters is that identity goals are going to create a shift in how you see yourself. And what it tends to do is reinforce habits that lead to that long-term success, that lead you to be a consistent writer. And being a consistent writer is more important than being a word count writer necessarily, because there are some weeks you won't be able to reach your word count that you set for yourself because the kids are sick, or you have to stay late at work, or you get sick, or life just happens, and then suddenly you're off your original goal of trying to create something within 3 months or 6 months or a year, whatever it is that you set for yourself. Whereas identity-based goals, when you see yourself as a writer, when you see yourself as an author, you're more likely to keep going, even when progress is slower. And feel free to ask questions in the chat at any time. You don't have to wait till the end. If I'm not explaining something right, I'd rather know immediately so I can make it clearer than at the end. So these are examples of identity-based goals. So I'm a dedicated writer who treats my writing time as sacred. So when you repeat these things to yourself, when this is who you want to be, when this is the habit you want to build, what will happen is the next time that you want to skip your writing time or someone presents you with an alternate choice of doing something else, like watching a TV show, you're going to have that identity moment of, do I want to be someone who watches a TV show today, or do I want to be that dedicated writer who's going to write today before I watch that TV show? Or I could watch that TV show tomorrow. My writing time right now is really precious to me. Same for, I'm a writer who writes for 20 minutes every day, no matter what. I'm a consistent writer. You can even use it for learning. I do this often where I'm a writer who continually improves my craft through study and practice. So one of my identity goals is to base it on, I'm someone who reads 1 chapter of a craft book every night. And I take my notes and I let that simmer and process in my brain. And the next day I read a 2nd chapter. As opposed to when I used to say that I would read 1 of those books a week, like I never got around to it. I had shelves and shelves of those books and, only read a couple. But now I'm working my way through all of my shelves and I've probably done almost all of them. So now I'm pretty caught up. But changing to an identity-based goal for learning was really helpful for me. So take a moment Think of a writing goal you've already set for yourself and try and rewrite it as an identity-based goal. So instead of I will write 50,000 words by June 30th, try I'm a writer who builds a daily habit. And if you're willing to share, then please drop your new goal in the chat so we can celebrate your first mind shift. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. And basically you're focusing on who you are and who you want to be rather than just what you do. Because it's easier to decide not to do something than it is to decide not to become someone or become something. Okay, I can hear little tick-ticks of little toes. There we go. Here's the other one making his appearance. I'd say it was a debut, but he's been live before. Anyone brave enough to share their identity goal in the chat? I can share mine. If I can move this tail out of the way. I just type this out. So Phyllis has shared, I'm a writer who can't wait to write when I wait. Oh my goodness, that's almost like a tongue twister for me. I'm a writer who can't wait to write when I get up in the morning. That's a great identity goal. That sounds exciting and inspiring and makes writing fun. Sandy has shared, instead of a word count goal, so I'm a writer who will write for 30 minutes 3 times a week. Great. And this way, no matter what you accomplish in those 30 minutes, is good because you've accomplished your goal. And building what might not seem like a lot, like 30 minutes, some people will say, oh, that's not a lot of time. I think it is. And depending on your lifestyle, that might be what you can squeeze in and manage for that time, especially 3 times a week. But the thing is, words add up and time adds up. And over several months, you'll have a book written. Even if you're only writing 300 words a day or 100 words a day or whatever, the 30 minutes. I'm a slow writer. It takes me about an hour and a half to write about 1,500 words. So I'm a slow one. Fallon has shared, I'm a writer who spends an hour per project every weekday. That's amazing. Pauline has shared, I'm a writer who will work on my novel in some way every day. That's fantastic. Because I think a lot of writing also happens off the page. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm doing the dishes, a bunch of ideas come into my head, or when I go for a walk, I'm mulling through a story problem, or, just sitting around thinking and daydreaming about the characters in my books in the shower or something, and then something will come to me. Lou has shared, I'm a writer who works on my novel for an hour 5 days a week. Fantastic. It's something you can track, and it's also something that you can become. So the hard goal method is a different system. This is looking at kind of like what motivates you to write a book. So especially if you're not someone who's an outcome-based person, if you're not someone that's product-based or motivated necessarily by the thing that you can hold at the end. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm totally one of those people. But this is looking at the heart of why you write and why you want to work on the project. And it helps you to stay motivated when you don't have that product yet, because that product might be years away. It might be 1 year away, 6 years away. Who knows? But basically it stands for heartfelt, animated, and required, and difficult. So Most people might be familiar with the SMART acronym, especially if you work in the corporate world. It's about, specific goals, measurable, achievable, realistic, time-bound. And that really works for some people, but not everybody, because they might feel more mechanical. It might feel more uninspiring because it's focusing on the finish line. Oh, Fallon has just shared that they have a lot of projects and they had to break it down to high, medium, and low priority projects. Yeah, I feel you. Last year, I think I had 4 books that were unfinished and in different stages. And then this year I decided it's the year I finish them because it's getting ridiculous how long. Some books are 50% written, some are still a first draft, some are an outline. And I just need to buckle down and kind of do what you did and prioritize whatever was closest to the finish line. That was the first one I worked on, and so on and so on. Getting back to the hard method, I wish they had called it HEART or something like that. I really do. I feel like hard makes it sound scary. But the first is looking at why the goal matters to you. Why is it important for you to write this story? Why do you want to write? And that's getting into your internal motivation for why you write. It's going to look at, some things we do because we have to, some things we do because we love to do. And we would do them no matter what, even if we never got a book deal, if we never got paid for it, if no one ever read it, we would do it anyways because we love it. The same way you might love other hobbies like painting or exercising or nature walks or whatever the case may be. So heartfelt is all about why does it matter to you? So for example, I want to write a novel because storytelling has always been my passion and I want to share my stories with the world. That's a why goal for me. That's what keeps me going when it's hard. It gets to my very heart of why I love stories, even why I read books, because I want to read other people's stories and talk about them and share them with the world in a different way. Animated is kind of triggering that part of your brain that, cat again, is triggering that part of your brain that is going to keep you motivated to the finish line. It's going to animate the outcome of your success. So one visualization might be, I can see my book on shelves in a store. I can imagine holding it in my hands. I can imagine the cover art for it. I can hear readers talking about my characters online. These are all things that you can use to visualize the outcome of all the hard work you're doing, writing this story or revising it or editing it or whatever stage you might be in. Required is looking at, is this goal necessary? Is this something you really want to do? It's kind of the idea of, we all say things like, oh, I want to eat healthy. Oh, I want to exercise. I want to lose weight. I want to read more. I want to do all these things. But some of those things are not things we truly want, or we're not willing to give up other things to actually do those things. So this is asking yourself, is this really something you want to do? But you might say to yourself, I've been saying I want to write a book for years, and if I don't commit to it now, I'll never do it. So it's time to do it right now. It's necessary. I want to do it. Or that particular book, that particular story, you might think to yourself, no, I don't think it's the right time for this story. I'd rather do something else. Like Fallon was saying, I'd rather do these other projects first in the high category before I do the low priority projects. And difficult is because you still want something that challenges you. So does it challenge you in the right way? So you might be someone who says, I've written short stories before, but a novel is a challenge that will push my creativity, that will push my discipline, that will allow me to tell a bigger story. So goals, there's a lot of research and science behind the difficulty level. If it's too hard, you'll give up. Because you still need to see as a human being some progress and chipping away at something, even if it's hard. If it's too easy, you'll give up because you're bored and you're not feeling challenged. So you want to find that middle difficulty for you that's just right, and it's different for everybody. For some people, trying an outline for the first time is a real big challenge because they're used to just sitting down and writing what comes to them. For other people, an outline is really easy, and the way to challenge themselves is to maybe allow some flexibility in that outline, allow themselves to go off script if they want. So, to try out this method, choose a writing goal, like finishing a novel, revising a draft, maybe it's submitting queries, whatever it might be, and answer the 4 hard goal questions to refine your goal. And I'll go back to the slide with the questions so you don't have to frantically look through your notes if you're taking them. But try and write a new meaningful hard goal and share it in the chat if you feel comfortable. But going to the heart of what you want to do. So I'll go through a couple examples. So instead of I will finish my novel, we're adding the idea of because. So we have the identity goal at the beginning. I'm a committed writer who will complete my novel, my first draft, in the next 3 months because I want to tell this story and prove to myself that I can do it. So hopefully that makes sense, but you're looking at why you do something, what motivates you to do what you do with your writing. Oops, let me go back to the questions for you. So 4 questions again. Why does the goal matter to you? Can you visualize the outcome? Is the goal really necessary? And does it challenge you in the right way? So I'll give you a couple of minutes to think that through. If you feel comfortable, feel free to share it in the chat. If not, that's okay, because we're getting into things that are a bit more personal and into your personal motivation and why things are important to you. So I completely understand if nobody wants to share that. So while everyone's doing that, Lou is asking, how do I set goals during the editing and revision process, which can feel difficult because I have to go over the material over and over again? Yeah, revising is a whole different beast, and there's a whole different way of thinking about it and shifting your mindset when it comes to revision. One of the things I recommend is to decide high and low priority things to go through your manuscript. So the first thing is to assess your manuscript, and you can set a goal for that, like I will assess my manuscript, or depending if you like outcome goals or identity goals, but you could say something like, I will assess my manuscript before I revise, or I'm a writer who assesses my abilities I'm a writer who assesses my abilities in my manuscript in order to make a plan. And usually I recommend choosing or going from big picture to small picture. So looking at structure, looking at character, looking at those big piece items and your scene arcs, your character arcs, your character development, the structure of the novel itself, how you are telling the story. I don't necessarily mean following first or 3-act structure or Save the Cat or Hero's Journey. Those are all fine. But each book, the story has to be told the way it needs to be told. So looking at your structure first, looking at your character pieces second, and then looking at the scene level pieces next. Doing more than 3 things in every single revision pass you do is too hard. Is really, really challenging. Like to look at description and dialogue and character and structure and scene and tension and pacing all at once every time you go through your revision is extremely difficult. So you might want to set goals based on your strengths. So if you're someone who's really, really good at character development, maybe you don't need to look at it so hard. Maybe that's a low priority for you. If you're someone who maybe struggles with structure, And that's usually the number one thing that writers struggle with is the structure of their story. So if that's you or anyone else in the chat, it's really normal and almost expected to struggle with the structure of your story as you're trying to figure it out and as you're revising it. So you might want to set goals based on your strengths. So if you're good at character development, you might say to yourself, I'm a writer who will focus on revising the structure of my novel first. I am going to focus on the structure. If you're outcome based, I'm going to focus on the structure for 30 days. I'm going to have my structure settled by June 1st. That's the more mechanical outcome based, if that's more motivating for you. If you're looking at the hard goal setting method, you might want to look at what motivates you to actually get through the revision process, because that's almost more difficult than writing your book, because you might be tearing down some pieces or deleting some pieces or adding new things and having to approach it with this fresh set of eyes, where you're judging your manuscript as to what's missing, what's strong about it, and what's also weak about it. Often what happens that I see in revisions is that people will end up revising the things that they're really good at that probably need the least revision, and they ignore the ones where they really actually need to revise and focus on, because it's hard. It's really hard. And it's easier to work on the stuff we're good at. So I don't know if that answers your question. It's a bit of a long answer. But for the revision process, if you want an identity-based goal, then think about the pieces of your manuscript and what kind of writer is going to tackle those. But definitely think of it in pieces. First pass, look at the big picture. Second pass, if you're happy with the big picture pieces. In the second pass, look at that next level of tension, pacing, dialogue. And then, then you get into the lower priority things like description, or depending what kind of book you're writing, some world building. If you're writing like sci-fi and fantasy, then world building is going to obviously take a higher priority stance. But if you're writing a book that takes place, in, current everyday life, then that part of the world building probably takes more of a backseat. It's still important. You want people to feel a sense of place. But we know what a table and chairs looks like. So we don't need to focus on that part of the world building. Instead, we focus on atmosphere and sense of place and belonging when it comes to world building. And that you can, by the time you get through revising the other pieces, you've likely already tackled most of that world building piece. Does that make sense? So if you've come up with your hard method goal, feel free to share. I can go through my own. Why do I write? Oh, good. I'm glad, Lou. It was a really long answer that you probably got more information than you wanted. But why does the goal matter to me? It's because I can't not write. It's something that's in me. If nobody saw my stories, I would still write. I love creating the worlds. I love creating characters. I love seeing how they come together. I always have a message in what I want to say with my writing. And fiction allows me to do that. In terms of visualizing, I often visualize seeing my book in print. I will sometimes go online, and there's programs you can use to create a book cover just for fun. And I print it out and I keep it close to my computer because it motivates me to see what my book could be once I finished it. I can visualize the phone call when the publisher calls and says, yeah, we want to buy your book. So yes, I can visualize it. To answer the animated question, for required, is the goal truly necessary? Absolutely. I can't not do it. I love writing. I have to do it. And the book I'm currently working on is so much fun and allows me to really work with humor which is a trademark in all of my books, but this one particularly allows me to be a bit stronger in it and try out some new humor techniques. So to me, it's necessary to play with that goal and to really do it. And then difficult, does it challenge me in the right way? Absolutely. There's different techniques that I'm using. I've got a bigger cast in this book that I need to develop these characters so they don't feel like cardboard people or the classic Pollyanna character. It challenges me in other ways where, because it has so many moving parts in the story, how does everything come together at the end? I'm writing a bigger romantic arc in this mystery book. So that's a challenge. So there's so many things about it that are challenging me in the right way that are keeping me engaged. I'll just move this. So I haven't seen any hard method goals in the chat, and that's okay. Like I said, we're getting into the part that's a bit more personal about why we do the things we do. But if you're willing to share, what did you discover when you applied the hard framework? Or how does your goal feel now that you've changed it or thought about it in a different way? Lou has a question. Do you have books to refer to humor techniques? There aren't very many out there, to be honest. I don't know where you're based, Lou, but Terry Fallis, who is a Canadian author who is known for his humor, has won the Stephen Leacock Award for Humor several times. He teaches a course on how to write humor at the University of Toronto, I believe, in the continuing studies. So you could just take the one class that he teaches. I think they do it virtually. At least they did it the last time I checked. If not, there's books out there, but I don't think they're very good. I think they're like those low quality books that people have put together. But one that's quite good is by Jimmy Carr. He's a stand-up comedian. And he wrote a book that's kind of like teaching people how to use the different things of humor, how to do a recurring through line, how to do a callback, how to do these different techniques. So you could check that out. That one I think is really good. The other thing that I find that's really good about humor is going to see stand-up comedy, because you can see the technique that they're using in the way that they're telling these stories, especially if they're a storyteller comedian and not like a punchline comedian. The other piece is going to look at, what are they called? They're like basically they're amateur comedians, but, oh my goodness, improv. That's the word I'm looking for. Going to watch improv or taking an improv class will really help teach you about humor, and that'll teach you how to write it, essentially. But these people are doing it on the spot. But when you take one of those classes, they break it down, which is really helpful. Kind of like the idea you could take a sword handling class to learn all about it if you're writing a fantasy in which swords are a huge part of your story or a huge piece of the world building. There's all kinds of different things that you can do for research. I don't know if you were in Draft Dash. No, I think you were. I think you told me that you were, and I think I remember your name from Draft Dash last year. But there was a really good session. No, it wasn't in there. It was in the Storytellers conference that I did in September. But there was a really great speaker, Christopher Stoller, who is a researcher and also a journalist, and he talked about the different techniques that you can use to research stories and using journalistic techniques. So that's a really great one to rewatch if you were part of that. You can only rewatch it if you bought the VIP ticket, though, that gave you access to all the videos for the lifetime. But does anyone want to share how they felt about do you feel like your goal is more heartfelt? Do you feel like it's more motivating? Maybe because it's about what motivates you and getting to the heart of why you write? If not, you can keep typing. I think there's a delay between the chat and me. So the other thing to do with goals is to break them down. So our brains are wired for basically 90 days. It's why, in the United States, there's always the first 100 days of the presidency. Everything is about 90 days or what you can do in 3 months or 12 weeks. And it's because our brains have trouble seeing past that in terms of a timeline. So yes, we can dream about 5 years from now, but our brain is not good at planning for 5 years from now because it's too far away. And with the way our brain processes time, it has trouble with things that are more than 90 days away. So if your goal is to write a book and to do that in 1 year, or whatever the case in a 1 year period, what usually happens is I'll do it later. It's just January. I have so much time. It's only March. I have so much time. It's August. I still have like 3.5 months left to do this. And then what happens is that suddenly it's December and we haven't done anything, or we've done very little and we're nowhere close to being done what we wanted to do at the end of the year. But the 90-day piece, our brain can actually see and feel that timeline, and it is more motivating to actually get something done in 90 days if we plan it that way than it is motivating to try and do something that will take an entire year. So Elizabeth has shared about the hard method. It was important for your memoir writing, all because of the word because, when I added the because to each hard point. Yeah, it's a pretty powerful little word. It really packs a punch, doesn't it? I'm glad that that was helpful. So when you're looking at 90 days, you need to also be realistic about what you can do. You need to think about days that you might be sick, days that you might not feel like writing, days that you might not be able to write because there's a holiday, or you're going on holidays, or you're going to a conference for work, or there are days you're going to stay late in the office that week, or your kids have 800 activities that you've got to drive them to, and that's going to cut into your writing time. So what you want to do for taking a goal is breaking it down into smaller steps. So example, if your goal is to finish a draft, you might look at month 1, you're going to outline and write 15,000 words. I'm making up these numbers, and I know some of these numbers are crazy. Month 2, you might say to yourself, I'm going to write another 20,000 words in that period of time. And then month 3, I'm going to finish my draft and I'm going to review some major plot points in it. But you want to break it down into milestones to keep momentum, especially if you're a visual person who needs to see progress and you need to see the book developing over time. You need to be able to look back and say, hey, in this month, these are the things that I accomplished. So you want to look at what's feasible in 90 days. What I often do is I take a calendar for those 90 days and I mark off days that I'm not going to write. I don't write on Sundays because that's my relaxation time and the time that I see friends and family and, do some of my hobbies and things like that. I do write 6 days a week just because that works for me and I have the flexibility to do that. But I mark off the days that I know I'm going to be working late because I know I have a coaching call that's going to be at 6 p.m. or I'm doing a workshop at 6:30 p.m. So I know I'm not going to write that day. I also mark off a few extra days to give me some flex time to say, you know what, these 3 days, I'm just going to deduct them from the days available for writing. And it's amazing to see how after I started with 90 days of writing, but really what I had left at the end was 50, let's say, 50 days that are available to me to write. And then I plan my time around what can I accomplish in 50 days. I know it takes me an hour and a half to write 1,500 words. So I start to plan out how many words do I need for a novel. I know I can't write a book in this amount of time, but I can accomplish this in this amount of time. And this avoids that superhero thing where 90 days, oh my God, I'm going to be perfect and amazing every day for 90 days, which is so not going to happen. I'm going to be tired some days. My cat's going to drive me crazy because he's going to wake me up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to be tired all day long. There's all kinds of things that are going to happen that you're not your superhero self that particular day. So don't expect yourself to be. Don't put the pressure on yourself to write those 1,500 words on a day that you have a terrible cold or you caught COVID or Easter is coming up and you may have plans with your family and you want to enjoy that without the pressure and guilt of not doing something that you had set for yourself to do every single day. So if you want, you can choose your writing goal for this quarter. You can break it into smaller steps. If you've chosen an identity goal, we can look at different steps of how you can break that down. This is something that is easier to do with outcome goals because you can very specifically say, I'm going to do these things within 30 days. But if you do want to set a quarterly planning goal, I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Give you, nope, I thought I had examples on it. Oh, they're written in there. But essentially breaking it down into 3 smaller steps is what helps our brain focus. I don't know if you've ever set like 20 goals for yourself or 10 goals for yourself, and you basically spread yourself too thin, and you end up achieving very little or nothing because it's too much. So for example, at the beginning of the year, I always set 3 specific goals. That's it. 1 for writing, 1 for my personal life, and 1 for business and work or career or however you want to call it. And that's it. There's a lot of projects that can fall under those things that I can break up in 90-day periods and 30-day periods. But I never set more than 3 goals. More than that, and I am scattered, I'm all over the place. And by the end of the year, I'm disappointed that I've not achieved the things I wanted to achieve because I've just been doing too many things. If you feel comfortable, share what your quarterly chat goal is in the chat. If not, that's okay. I can tell you that my goal for this quarter is to finish the second draft revision of the novel I'm currently working on. So I'm giving myself 3 months to go through all those pieces, really focus and buckle down on one story at a time. Because I've been working on a couple different ones and I've been a little disappointed that they're not moving as well as I would like them to. And I know it's because I'm too focused on too many projects at the same time. So I've chosen one, 90 days. We're revising the second draft. I usually only write 3 to 4 drafts of a novel before it goes off to a publisher. So I'm buckling down on this one. In the meantime, let's talk about tracking your progress without overwhelming yourself. So this is especially helpful if you're a visual person, which is what I am. I need to see things. I need to see the progress. I need to know that it's moving forward. And to do that, I use a couple different methods and we'll go through the different levels. So tracking without overwhelming yourself. Tracking if you like a little bit more information and a little bit more visual aid. And then I'm going to call the Cadillac model of tracking progress if that's something that appeals to you because you like data and analytics. So basically tracking helps you stay accountable to yourself, to know if you've done what you said you would do. It helps you recognize patterns in your writing habits. Are you a better writer in the morning, afternoon, or evening? Is your brain tired at the end of the day, or is it energized by writing? You can adjust your approach when needed. So if you know where it's going, you know that where you've fallen off track, you know if you've gone the other way, you know that if there are things you need to adjust, including your goal. Sometimes you're not just adjusting your approach or how often you do something or the time that you set for it. Sometimes you have to adjust the goal because for that particular, let's say 90 days, you can't write 3 times a week. So you cannot be a writer who writes 3 times a week in that particular 90-day period because you have a lot of illness in the family. Maybe you're caretaking an elderly parent. Maybe there's things going on with your kids and you cannot dedicate that time. And maybe you need to change your goal to be, I'm a writer who writes once a week. And then, of course, celebrating small wins is going to keep your motivation high. And it doesn't have to be going out and buying a cake and having a big party. Although if you want to do that, please go ahead and please invite me because I love cake. But you can celebrate those wins by doing something small, like treating yourself to your favorite tea or cup of coffee. You can just say to yourself and recognize like, hey, I just finished chapter 4 and that was a tough one to write and I'm kind of proud of myself. It can be something just as small like that. Sandy has shared in the next month, she's going to finish the first act of the book. In quarter 2, she's going to finish the second act. In the third quarter, she's going to finish the final act and then book her coaching sessions for the rewrite. Those are great. Those are all really great goals for the different quarters of the year. So let's talk tracking. Because basically it's really easy to set your goals, but if you don't track them, they're going to fade in the background. You're going to forget about them. So research has said that having your goals front and present where you check them regularly or see them regularly actually make a difference in you accomplishing your goals. Sometimes what we do is we spend a lot of time, we reflect, we set goals, and then we forget about them. We don't look at them again, and then we get busy with life because life is life, and things go on, and we forget about that. So one of the best things you can do is have either, write it in a notebook where you will check that notebook once a week. Once a week, you're going to look at it and say to yourself, what's one thing I can do to move this goal forward this week? And maybe that's writing a chapter. Maybe that's revising one chapter or one scene. Maybe it is, sketching out a character. Who knows? Depends where you're at in your story. But you want to keep it front and center. So I'll actually show you a picture of my my visual writing progress, the way I track it, but I'll show that a little later. But basically, things that are low maintenance that you can do are a simple habit tracker. So this is like marking an X on your calendar, or if you're more techy, using an app where you can click, yes, I did this today. And then you can kind of see how often you've done something. One, if you said you were the type of writer who writes 3 times a week, you can see if you've actually written 3 times a week. And usually what happens is when we see our progress, we are more motivated by it. And so we tend to do more, even if we didn't plan on it. It's like the idea of setting a timer for 5 minutes to clean your bathroom, and then suddenly 30 minutes later, you're still like wiping down everything that's in there and spraying everything that's in there. Or doing something you really hate doing, like organizing a closet. You might say to yourself, I'm going to do this for 10 minutes. And then suddenly an hour later, you're still there doing it because you got into it and you got motivated by seeing your progress as you were going through this project. Weekly check-ins. You can ask yourself once a week, did I write this week? What worked about my writing? What didn't work? And it's not necessarily about assessing the quality of the work, but what worked in terms of the times that you wrote. Was it stressful? Would it have been better to write in the morning when you were having your cup of coffee before you started the workday instead of trying to do it at the end? You can ask yourself all kinds of things about what worked and what didn't work. You can use sticky notes or index cards or whatever, where you write down your goal and tape it to your computer so you can see it. You can look at milestones and write them down, like breaking up your story into, 5,000 word chunks and checking them off as you pass each of those milestones. All of that can be really helpful in sort of visualizing and seeing your progress. And these are all perfect if you don't want to spend a lot of time doing this. This takes like 5 seconds to mark an X on your calendar that says you wrote that day. If you want to go more into the medium effort side of things, you can use a bullet journal or a planner. And this is where you can maybe write down what days you wrote, how many words you wrote that day, or what you did to accomplish something. Like maybe you might say, January 1st, I wrote 1,000 words and I finished a scene. Some people will use spreadsheets where they'll use Google Sheets or Excel or something similar, and they'll track their progress by date and project and word count and kind of be able to look at that data after with easy formulas. Some people will use a visual tracker like a bar graph to see how far they've moved forward in their story. These are just ideas. I'm not saying you have to do any of these because again, this is the low maintenance tracking is the easiest way to look at your progress. This is if you enjoy doing a little bit more. So I'm kind of hybrid. I use a bullet journal where I like to track the number of days that I wrote that month. I like to track my word count because it helps me plan projects. So when I'm talking to my literary agent, I can confidently say, this will be finished in 6 months or 3 months because I know approximately how many words I write per hour on any given day. Obviously, some days are easier, some days are harder, but in general, I know how many words I can write per day before I reach creative exhaustion. And more than an hour and a half of writing is too much for me. An hour and a half is kind of where I max out and is my happy space where I still want to continue writing the next day without feeling miserable about it. And I also mark what I accomplished in that writing session. And that really helps with burnout. When you can see your progress, when you can see what you've achieved. I mark how I felt about my project that day. Did I feel like I was on track? Did I feel happy with the words I put on the page? And being honest with yourself about it. It's okay if you know they need revision, but do you feel good about the time that you spent writing? And these are things that can help prevent burnout. They can prevent feeling frustrated with your project because you can always look back and see, yeah, there's some good in this. Not everything is trash. Not everything is, needing to be revised and thrown out the window. You can kind of go through it and kind of feel good about your progress. These are more high commitment. So, a daily word count log, accountability groups or writing buddies. This is the best way to stay on track, especially if you have a writing group where you are sharing your writing so that you kind of have a deadline, whether you meet monthly or weekly. But they are higher commitments because you're reading other people's work, you are working on your own writing and making sure that you can share it, and you're committing to the time needed for that meeting with people, or if you're exchanging it by email, then the time to write those emails and write feedback in a written way if that's how you're doing it. So for example, my writing group meets every Thursday night. Our meetings are probably about 2 hours long. There's 4 of us, and we all share our writing several days in advance so that we can get feedback from each other on that Thursday meeting. I'm completely happy dedicating that time and that commitment to those meetings and that group because I quite love them and they're really helpful to me. But that is a more high commitment way of tracking your progress and staying accountable. And then other people who are more techie, they love using Notion, Trello, Scrivener goals, all kinds of different, I'm sure I haven't even named close to how many are out there. But they love using these programs to keep track of drafts and revisions and deadlines and versions and how far away they are in their word counts and things like that. These are all functions that these projects can do. So I see we're at 7:27. This is just a random question about what tracking method feels like a best fit for you. If you want to share that in the chat and discuss with people, please do. This is my tracking method. So the picture's not super great, but essentially it's a Kanban board. So the top part It's split into three things, three categories. The top part is what I need to do for my writing goals. The second section is what I'm currently doing, what I'm currently working on. And the bottom section is what I have finished doing. And because I'm a visual person, this really helps me see my progress. I get to see the sticky notes move from the do to the doing to the done. And the more sticky notes that are at the bottom, the more I know I've completed, the better I feel, the more motivated I am. This does not work for everybody. But it is the thing that works for me. I have one of these boards for each of my goals. So I have three of them. They hang on the wall in my office. This one I just took off the wall to be able to take a better picture that wasn't too dark. But essentially this comes from Toyota. This is a method that they developed when they were building cars, about what needed to be done, what they were currently working on, what was currently in testing. I don't need that phase because I'm not testing anything with my books at the moment. And then what was finished in their projects. And basically they were able to cut down the amount of time and errors in order to create the cars that they were building at the time. I think this is like in the 1980s. So I'm sure they've evolved their Kanban method. But I quite like it and adopted it for my own writing and my own purposes. So basically I write sticky notes. I break down my book into pieces. So for example, the outline, the premise, I put 5,000 word chunks, 5,000, 10,000, 15,000. And when I reach that part of the word count milestone, I just move the sticky down. Submitting to my agents, submitting to my writing group, like all of those are different sticky notes, different parts of the project, and they move down as they go. So right now I'm working on 3 different things for the project that I'm currently working on. And eventually when I complete them, they'll move to the done section. And Lou has just shared that the low maintenance tracking methods work for me. Yeah, that's usually the number one that works for most people, is something that's quick and easy and doesn't take a lot of time. So these are just examples of how I've broken down some of the projects, some of the pieces of the project I'm working on. So things that I've already completed, like the outline for the novel, creating a premise, and I've already revised 5,000 words. I'm currently revising the second chunk of 5,000 words, and then what's left to do, minus the pitch to agents, because I've already pitched the story to my agent and she said I could work on it. So I should actually move that to the done category. But that's sort of an example of what the visual picture looked like. So there's a thing about, I'm sure you've all read Atomic Habits, or if not, you may have heard of it. But there's a lot of power in small, consistent habits, because it's easier to maintain a small habit than to work on a huge goal. It's easier to say to yourself, I'm going to write 3 times a week, than it is to say, I'm going to write 365 days this year, or I'm going to write 300 days this year. That is daunting and scary and too big. Small wins are what build momentum and confidence. So every time you achieve something, you feel good. And therefore, the more often you achieve something, the better you'll feel and the more motivated you'll be to continue working on something. And then tiny habits are going to lead to big breakthroughs over time. So writing 300 words a day on a regular basis is going to give you a novel at the end of the year. And sometimes it's easier to break it down that way than it is to say, I'm going to write 2,000 words a day, 5 days a week. And by the end of the year, I'm going to have a novel. So basically, rather than focusing on the enormity of the goal, you're shifting your attention to daily actions that can make progress on your goal that is more achievable and sustainable. I think that's pretty much it for that piece. Hopefully that makes sense for everyone. So these are examples of small habits, like I'm going to write for 10 minutes each morning before I check my phone. I'm going to open my manuscript every evening, even if I only add 1 sentence, I'll have done something. I'll set a timer for 20 minutes and write. I'll spend 5 minutes outlining my next scene before I start writing. I'll read one page of a craft book before bed. There are so many small habits that you can create to be a consistent writer, and things that don't feel so big. And then over time, you can increase those habits. You can write once a week, and then, if that's working and you're doing that consistently and it feels good, maybe you up it to twice a week. And then you keep doing that, making sure that you're consistent and that's working for you. And then you can keep changing that habit and increasing that habit. So let's choose your small habit. What is one habit that you can do that's realistic, that is small? Don't come out of the gate with, I'm going to write 6 days a week. That's too big of a habit to start. But what's one small realistic habit you can commit to right away? So that when you leave this session, you're going to do something very specific, and you're going to start doing that tomorrow to move the needle forward on your goal. And if you feel comfortable, share it in the chat. Make yourself accountable so that I can email you and check how you're doing. I won't do that, but sometimes saying what you're going to do out loud is really helpful. So while you think of your new habit, there's a couple of tricks to sticking with your new habit. So the first is pairing it with an existing habit, so something you already do all the time. So for example, maybe one of the first things you do when you get up in the morning is make yourself a cup of coffee and sip it. So what you can do is pair writing with your morning coffee ritual. While your coffee is brewing, you're going to make notes about your manuscript. While you're drinking your coffee, you're going to write for 10 minutes before you go off to work. Whatever that might be. Sandy is going to write for 30 minutes 3 times a week, and she's marked it on her calendar. Excellent. You've already blocked time. That's fantastic. The other thing about habits is making it easy for yourself. So reducing any barriers to doing the thing you want to do. So if finding your manuscript on your computer is really annoying and challenging all the time, keep it open. Just minimize it. And that way, every day that's what I do, because I find it really annoying to look for stuff online. I just keep it open all the time. And then when I'm ready to use it, I can just click and it's already there in my bottom taskbar. And it takes me 2 seconds to get into my manuscript. And I know it's not hard to look for it. I'm super organized, but it irritates me to do it. And so that's a barrier for me. The same way I like to go swimming in the morning, but I do it at 6 a.m. And so to remove the friction of doing that, then I already have my stuff packed. I have my bathing suit and my clothing ready to put on first thing in the morning. I already have my stuff packed. It's waiting at the front door for me to go in the morning. And maybe for you, it might be setting up a writing space, a space that's clean and dedicated to where you keep your laptop and your notes and that kind of thing. Maybe it's keeping a notebook nearby so that you can just scribble down some words super quickly whenever you feel the urge to do that. Tracking it, which we've already talked about. And then celebrating your small wins, because progress is progress, no matter how big or small it might be. So as we get to the end, what's one thing you've learned that you're going to use today or tomorrow? Because it's depending where you are. If you're like Pauline, your day is just starting. But if you're like Lou, who's in Toronto, then your day might be ending. So William is going to open his work in progress in the morning and evening. Lou is going to spend 5 minutes assessing the scene she'll be working on before she begins writing her writing session. And if you have any questions, please ask them, because this is the very end. So I'm happy to stick around and answer any questions. If you think of a question later after this session ends, you can just email me. It's up on the screen. If you forgot my email address, you can go to our website and there's a contact us form at the bottom and it will go to my inbox and I can answer your question. There will be a replay in case you want to go back through the questions or anything like that for the hard goals or look at a slide again. That will probably go out sometime tomorrow. So I'll just give it a minute or two for questions because I know there's a lag. All right, doesn't look like, oh. Lou says, I need to make it a habit to celebrate my wins. Not sure how to do that. You can do small things, right? You can recognize the win, which is something a lot of us don't do. We just move on to the next piece. So you can just take a moment and pause and say, hey, I just finished that thing and that was a lot of work and I'm happy that it's done. You can do something small like make yourself a fancy coffee or go buy a fancy coffee if that's more your speed and kind of have a celebratory coffee. You can call a friend and, you know, especially if you have a friend that you talk about your writing with, you might tell them like, hey, I just finished scene 5 and it was tough and it's done now and I feel good about it. It's a really good scene, which is another way you can celebrate it. You can do something bigger if you want. You can go out for dinner. You can buy yourself something that you've wanted to have for a while if that's something that motivates you. But I think the most important part is that you acknowledge the win because so many of us don't do it. I have a friend who has like a whole schedule of, because this is what motivates her, is having a prize for her work. So when she finishes like the first act of her book, she absolutely loves shoes. So she has scheduled that she's budgeted, once I finish this, I get to buy this pair of shoes that I've wanted for several months. When I finish my outline, she's got something down like I'm going to buy myself, you know, a cupcake. So she has these rewards that get bigger and bigger up until, you know, when she finally finishes her book, then she's got the biggest reward, like a weekend away. I can't remember exactly what she put for herself, but she's got this ladder of prizes, which is really cute. And that's what motivates her and that's what works for her. I know that doesn't work for me because I will just buy the thing that I need. Yeah, I'm the same way, Lou. I just keep going to the next part of the project and I don't always stop to be like, oh my God, you just wrote half a book. Like, I just keep going to the next milestone and don't always stop to take a look. So now that's one of my habits that I'm trying to create and one of my identity goals that I'm trying to create, that I'm someone who does do that because I do it for other people. With my coaching clients, I'm always cheering them on and I'm happy for them when they reach a milestone in their writing with me. I do it with my writing group when they finish a chapter or they've submitted something that's really amazing or they finish their first draft. I'm always congratulating them and telling how great the work is, but I don't do it for myself. So now I'm trying to do that. Well, if there's no other questions, then I wish you all a lovely day or evening, depending where you're located. I hope you've gotten something out of this workshop and this webinar. Hopefully tomorrow you're going to start working on your identity goal or your hard goal. And keep me posted. Like, send me an email and let me know how far progress you've made on your goal, you know, come a month from now or whatever the case. I'd love to know where you're at so we can celebrate you. So have a lovely evening, have a lovely rest of your day, and the replay will go out tomorrow. So bye, everybody.